Hey, thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. You know, this seminar is different from many of the ones that we teach during the year. Most of the time, we're talking about subject matters that are new to you, so you're there to learn. What we're doing in this particular webinar, on the other hand, is a fast-paced review of the changes that have occurred during the past year, particularly during the 2012 calendar year. And the purpose is to make sure that you didn't miss anything. If you get to the end of today's program and you can say to yourself, wow, I'm good, got it all covered, then that is the best possible outcome. On the other hand, if you find that there are areas where there were developments that creeped in that you didn't know about, we've given you the links so that you can go in and you can access the underlying issuances or laws or court cases, and you can do what you need to do. So the link is found on page 1 of the materials, and that's a whole lot easier than clicking from a PDF with your control click, or for much easier than typing something in. I don't need to tell anybody that there have been fewer changes in the operations compliance realm during the past year than there were in the lending compliance realm. But that doesn't mean that there weren't changes you need to be aware of or developments. It's just that these things go in cycles, and right now the cycle is placing more of an emphasis on lending compliance as the CFPB undertakes its work under the Dodd-Frank Act. I want to begin by talking about some useful tools. If you haven't used the Banker Tools section on bankersonline.com, you're really missing an opportunity, because this is an area of the site where we have some tools developed by our staff and others that were formulated by other bankers who have been willing to share them. All of the tools are free, and they're organized by subject matter, so you can find what you need to find. The first tool is a Reg D tracking chart. You know, when the CFPB amended when Dodd-Frank amended the law effective July 21st, 2011, to say you can offer interest-bearing demand deposit accounts, a lot of people thought, oh, so they're wiping out NOW accounts and money market accounts, and all those restrictions and things are going to go away. No, they aren't. You still have eligibility restrictions on NOW accounts. You still have transaction restrictions on your money market deposit accounts and your savings accounts. The interest-bearing DDA is simply an additional product offering option. So you're stuck with continuing to monitor covered transactions on money market accounts and savings accounts so that you can spot instances where your customer exceeds the limit on those transactions, and you can track the action that you took in response to the customer exceeding the limits. So this Reg D tracking chart is an Excel spreadsheet that makes it easy for you to do that documentation. Next tool is a customer complaint policy. You know, more and more emphasis is getting placed on having an effective customer complaint process. Why? Because often when there's smoke, there's fire, and the regulators have realized that, and they want to make sure that you have an effective process for dealing with complaints, so that whether somebody just makes a phone call and says something like, hey, your online banking is down, you don't want your receptionist to say, oh, I'm sorry, well, sometimes that happens. Why don't you try back in half an hour? And if you have, allergens in the air. If you have multiple people that call and say the same thing, maybe it's a denial of service attack on your online banking server, and maybe that's being done to obscure the fact that hackers have gotten into your customer accounts and are siphoning off money. So regardless of the area of the bank, customer complaints need to be processed according to a well-thought-out procedure. Excuse me.
One of the other reasons that the customer complaint policy is so important is the fact that if you have a lot of complaints about a particular product or something, it might just be that you have got some clues about a potential UDAP violation. You might be involved in something that's unfair or deceptive if customers aren't understanding one of your policies or one of your products. So making sure that you have somebody tracking these complaints very carefully can help you see some, pardon the use of the phrase, red flags that might indicate you've got a problem, and you can get it taken care of before anybody notices it.
And it could be that it also helps you spotlight where you need further training of some of your employees. One of the outside speakers the other day was talking about going into a bank and talking to the bank teller during a transaction, and the bank teller said, Mr. Krebs, you can do these transactions with online banking now. And he said, I'm not really comfortable about that because of all the security threats and so forth. I don't want any money coming out of my account due to cyber thieves. And the teller said, oh, no, Mr. Krebs, you don't need to worry about that, because if something like that happens, the FDIC protects you up to $250,000. So I'm sure those of you listening are gasping like, no, that's not where FDIC insurance comes into play. It comes into play when a bank fails. So when you get somebody like him who then goes and says, let's have a talk with the supervisor because I don't think this is right, then you spotlight where further training needs to be done. And the regulators are accepting complaints. They have been for a long time, but the CFPB, as the new sheriff in town, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is really very public about its complaint process and what it does with them. So they have a complaints database that you can access and study, and then from time to time they write up the results of their investigation of particular complaints, and they put them on their website in kind of a story time fashion. So when the regulators start looking at something with this much of a focus, it's time for you to do the same. One of the other tools that's perennially popular is the Reg CC Funds Availability Calendar. That's been updated. And then you have a disaster preparedness checklist. Now, we don't have hurricanes in my state, Oklahoma, but we have tornadoes, we have ice storms. Seems like each part of the country has its own little special slice of weather Hades. So it's nice to look at something like this and compare it to any checklist that you have, because in the event of a disaster, you don't want to have to make something up on the fly. You want to have a well-thought-out course of action that you can follow. The private ATM checklist is a big deal because you may have customers who own and operate their own private ATMs. From a Bank Secrecy Act standpoint, you have to be concerned about possible money laundering. I was speaking to Ken Gallagher, who had a banker tell him that they were thinking about filing a SAR on a customer because the customer wasn't getting as much cash as the bank thought the customer should be getting. What? Well, the customer